presentation is the last in the series on the cardinal virtues and the last in the larger series on the virtues. And we finish up with the kind of, you might say, the least of all virtues, but then again, probably one of the most difficult of all the virtues because of what it controls, and that is temperance, self-control, being able to ultimately become master of ourselves, of our own passions, of our own bodies, and to have complete mastery over ourselves is really the realm of the virtue of temperance. And so, once again, just keeping in the forefront of our minds the definition of virtue, that it is a firm, habitual disposition to achieve our ultimate good being that of God. And so, habitual and firm, meaning that it's lasting, it's solid, it's stable, it's something that's there, always kind of with us once it's been developed, and we really have to kind of work against it or never use it in order for it to kind of go away. But even then, that takes time, and so it takes time to build virtue, and it will take time to lose virtue should that happen. That's making it habitual and firm. Disposition, by that we mean it's the power to do something. It's a capability. It's an enabling for some capacity. And finally, it's always for the good. Vice is for the bad, and virtue is always for the good, and specifically good action. So let's look at temperance in general. The key idea to temperance is moderation, self-control. Acquired temperance, that virtue that we can acquire through repeated human actions, is basically just moderation. Not being excessive, but not denying ourselves too much. It's, the classic case of eating. It's I've eaten until I'm no longer hungry. I don't need to eat anymore. To eat anymore would be excessive, but to never eat enough, to constantly undereat, could also put yourself at risk for health concerns. And so finding that middle ground, so to speak, that's moderation. And then part of that is self-control. Being able to moderate between two extremes is one thing. Self-control, and that is being able to determine that for yourself and actually follow through with it. That's self-control. That's part of the virtue of temperance. So this virtue is the enabling of one to be moderate in the pleasure that we get from created goods and the use of created goods. And by created goods, we don't mean things made in a factory, things that human beings have created or come up with. We mean basically anything that's not God. All right? God is that which is uncreated. All right, so God is uncreated. Everything else is created. So whether it's something that we've come up as humans with in our ingenuity, or whether it's anything that God has created on this green earth or outside of this green earth, anything that can be considered created is something that is within the realm of temperance and how we use it. Now, as such, it's similar to fortitude, but because we're just talking about our basic relationship with goods, things that we like and things that we don't like, things that we seek, things that we try to avoid, we're talking about a virtue that is in charge of our concupiscible passions. If you remember, our concupiscible passions are those passions which we have towards a good in general. Whether I love something, and if I love it, then of course I desire it if I don't have it, and I enjoy it if I do have it. And if it's something I don't like, it's an evil, then of course I don't like it. And if it's near me, I get upset and angry about that. And if it's not, I do everything I can to avoid it. It's that general and simple relationship between things we like and things we don't. And as we all know, if we think of it in those general terms, there's always some things that we really like. And we have a little less self-control in moderating those things. And then some things we hate so much that we will literally walk over our own children. Not that you have children, but we'll walk over our own children just to make sure we don't get near them. The kind of comedic example that I've always used is my wife is deathly afraid of bees. And I tell my kids all the time that if you see a bee and you're near your mother, run. Not because of the bee, because your mother will probably step all over you just to get away from that bee. So protect yourself. That kind of base relationship that we have with things that we love and with things that we hate. So the virtue of temperance enables us to moderate those those desires that we have for things we like and those aversions that we have for things we don't like. And of course, it also tries to moderate and enables us to moderate the pleasure that we take in those things as well. Because we all know we seek those things that we like because they bring us pleasure. And if they bring us too much pleasure, inordinate amounts of pleasure, then that can also wreak havoc in our lives. Now, there are lots of daughter virtues of temperance. And so just going to kind of briefly go through some of those here. Honesty. Honesty is that sincerity, openness, or truthfulness in word and deed. Um, Humility is the awareness and the appreciation that all gifts are from God. We have a tendency to think that because I find so much pleasure in something, I have a right to have it. And that's just not the case. You have no right to anything. Your very life was given to you. So you have no right to that except for the fact that it was given to you, and it was given to you by God. And that's why I don't have the right to take it, because I didn't give it to you. But your life was given to you. And so you should appreciate and you should be aware that your life and everything that you have is a gift. That's humility. Meekness. Meekness is that serenity of your spirit while focusing on others. What we mean by that is having a kind of a complete control over your emotions and your passions in your desires, especially your desires for things, and being able to focus on others and not be so um, so overcome with either rage with those people that you don't like or inordinate desire and passion towards someone that you love. Having that calmness of spirit so that you can actually focus on the other person. You see, when we're so infatuated with someone else, it actually just becomes something that's all about us. It's all about my infatuation with that person rather than it being about the good of that person. And when I really don't like someone, it's more about my wants and desires of that person to fall over dead or to get out of my life or to whatever, instead of the good of the other person. So all of these are about the good of the other person, ultimately love. Meekness is that control of our spirit in those times when we could lash out. It's that moderation of passion, of anger, and of infatuation. And then we get just the general daughter virtue of moderation, which is simply attention to balance. We can find moderation in everything. Modesty. Modesty is that purity of our heart in action, especially in speech and dress. What we mean by modesty here, it tends to be overused with dress, as in conservative dress. But modesty is really all about protecting the person. Someone who is modest is not someone who necessarily dresses conservatively or speaks very little or speaks conservatively or whatnot. The modest person is the person who protects their personhood, meaning they do things, they speak, they dress, they act in a way which reveals who they really are. And we can see how this is brought into the analogy of dress. Someone who dresses inappropriately is usually drawing attention not to their person, but to their body, or to some ideology, or to some thing that they have a passion for or an aversion to. But when they do that, they're drawing attention away from them as a person. Whereas the person who's modest in their action, who's modest in their speech, who's modest in their dress, is someone who is preserving and protecting their very personhood. You know, someone who doesn't speak modestly, someone who doesn't dress modestly, tends to tends to objectify themselves, tends to do something to draw the attention somewhere else, but then they still crave deep down, they want someone to see me. Well, the person who really wants you to see the person inside, the me, that person is the modest person who speaks and acts with purity of heart. Orderliness, which is simply keeping the self and the things clean and in good order. Not that kind of disarray that ordered flows from ordered passions. So once we have ordered passions, once we have ordered desires, we tend to keep the things, the external things, and the relationships with those external things in order as well. And finally, just self control, joyful mastery of the passions and desires. We tend to think it's just no fun unless I can have what I want, when I want, and how much I want. But the problem is, we always know that in the end, something doesn't work out quite right. We overindulge. We don't feel that great the next day. It's fleeting. The joy we have is in the moment, and then after that, it's kind of like that addictive desire. It goes away, and you need the next high, and it needs to be greater. Whereas if you don't have those unbridled passions, then you start to have that joyful mastery over yourself. The passions and desires are not pulling you in so many ways, and then you become content. And so then we have the difference between acquired and infused temperance. So acquired temperance would be that use of sound natural reason to judge what is kind of reasonable in a situation with regard to something, created goods, and would act accordingly. How much do I really need to eat right now? All right. When I go to Roosters, I always get 15 wings, but I just had lunch 3 hours ago, and it's going to be an early dinner. I probably don't need to order so many. Or, in another situation, I haven't eaten in a while. I can probably stand to eat a bit more in this particular case. That's using sound reason based upon our relationship with created goods, food in this particular example. Whereas infused temperance, once again, our reason is perfected by faith, and we use that reason to judge the desire that we have and the use of created goods in light of our ultimate destiny. It might be reasonable for me to eat 3 meals a day, have a good breakfast, a decent lunch, a solid dinner, do some activity throughout the day, and live a good, healthy life. But it's Lent, and man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And therefore we fast. Therefore, with infused temperance, I deny myself not just an excessive amount of food, I deny myself a moderate amount of food. And for some people, I might deny myself all food today. I'm only going to drink water and some tea because I'm going to submit and subjugate my body to my soul to ensure that I am rightly ordered, and so that I can lift my soul up to God in prayer. Infused temperance allows us to do that, whereas acquired temperance would not.